Hey, greetings everyone. GleeCon here again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. On our last episode, we wrapped up the first part of the Sylvanas novel, so we're about a quarter of the way done. There was a little interlude, a cutscene where Anduin and Sylvanas continued to kind of talk, and Sylvanas was like, "Cool story, bro, about your childhood. Mine sucked worse." And I think the point of Sylvanas' point is that, like, my life actually sucks worse because it was so good and I lost it all. But we'll see. Stay a while and listen as we begin part 2. We're here. We have a quote from Sylvanas Windrunner that says, "Stay strong, stay angry." And now we're going to begin chapter 7. "I can't believe she put you on patrol duty, like a trainee," Eldaron grumbled. "Whatever she thinks about you becoming Ranger General, you are far better than that." "I wish I could say I'm surprised," Sylvanas replied as she packed what she would need for the day. "Actually, I am surprised. Surprised that it took her this long." "We all knew she would be hard on you," Lorthamar said. "She cannot show favoritism." "Of course," Sylvanas replied. "I expected to be treated like everyone else." Now that Illyria had flaunted tradition and stirred the pot, Sylvanas was not just anyone else, and Larissa seemed determined to make her pay in one way or another. Every lesson was as much a trap as a test. Sylvanas wanted to say more, but she refused to sound like a whining child. There had been a turn in Larissa's demeanor following Illyria's departure. That fleeting glimpse of the woman who had danced lovingly with her husband, who had gifted Illyria with symbols of her family, seemed to depart with Illyria herself. Larissa had always been harsh, and Sylvanas understood why, but when Sylvanas' training began, it felt to her as if her mother was determined to drill the laughter out of her most challenging daughter. And, Sylvanas mused bitterly, she is succeeding. So here she was, performing tasks like a fresh recruit. She finished packing some fruit, dried meat, water, bandages, and would leave as soon as the previous cycle of scouts had returned. "Have Anareth and Rendevan returned yet?" The other forest riders engaged in fletching arrows or stringing bows only shook their heads. Sylvanas shifted her weight from one foot to the other for a moment, then said, "I'm going ahead anyway." She needed to be somewhere other than here, enduring the looks of unwanted sympathy from her friends and fellow rangers. "I am coming with you." Surprised, Sylvanas looked at Lorthamar. She had half expected Haldoran to make the offer, but Lorthamar had beaten him to it. "Your Ranger General said I was to go alone," she reminded him. "I never heard her say that," he said, and picked up his bow. While the Amani trolls to the east of Quel'Thalas were an ever-present threat, there had been little activity from them recently. Larissa had yet to experience combat, and Sylvanas had only tasted it once. Scouts seldom had anything to report. Patrols were maintained as tradition, as a formality, and sometimes as reprimands. She and Lorthamar trudged along in companionable silence, drawing closer to the marker. "Do you think you will ever be tested, as Illyria was?" Lorthamar asked. Sylvanas scowled. "I thought I would be, but at this point I do not think that will happen." She hesitated then because this was Lorthamar. She added, "It feels as if she doesn't think me worth enough to be formally presented to the Forest Riders as their future Ranger General." And that hurt more than she had expected. Lorthamar nodded. "The argument could be made that you have already been tapped to be Ranger General. Perhaps Larissa does not feel you need such a test." Sylvanas stopped in her tracks, regarded him, then spread her arms wide, indicating the menial task she had been set. "I think our current mission supports my original opinion." Lorthamar chuckled sadly. "Perhaps you are right. Larissa made no secret of her disappointment in Illyria's decision." Sylvanas resumed walking. "It doesn't matter. Let her do what she feels she must. But if she wants me to step down, she will have to order me to do it. I will not do it on my own." "I have no doubt of that." They were approaching the first Amani marker. It was a large slab of stone hung with ceremonial masks, a sort of shrine that served as a warning. From this point on, interlopers were in Amani territory. Candles were tended to as best wind permitted. Offerings were made, sometimes the skulls of their victims. Sylvanas had passed by it more times than she could count. It had unnerved her the first time Larissa brought her here when she was a small child. "These are the enemies, Sylvanas," her mother had said. "They are cruel and show no mercy. We defeated them long ago, but like all vermin, they are hard to eradicate. If you see them, run. Sylvanas stared at the skulls. But I want to fight them. You will, Nerissa said, and you will be ready. It was a good memory of her mother, and Sylvanas wished she had more of them. Her gaze flickered to the marker they were preparing to pass. Lorthamar saw it too. Randavan sat cross-legged, his back against the tall, cold stone. His head was in his lap. The two Farstriders acted as one. The only communication between them shared instincts and training. They both knew the various hand signals. Arm extended, get to ground. Palm up, hold position. Hand on heart, prepare to fire, but there was no need. Their bows were out and fitted with arrows in a fraction of an instant. They stood back to back, ears straining, eyes searching for any sign that the trolls who had slaughtered Randavan and posed his body in such a sickening fashion were still about. The minutes stretched on, and finally Sylvanas lowered her right hand, fingers splayed. Stand down, do not fire. She pointed to the body, held up two fingers, tapped near her eye, and then made a circle in the air. There were two Farstriders. Look for the second and make a circuit. Lorthamar nodded and turned to obey. Sylvanas went to the marker, checked to make sure no hidden trap awaited her, and knelt down beside the fallen Farstrider. You are both so new, she said softly. You deserved a chance to at least taste life before it was taken from you. She visually examined the corpse, checking for any telltale smudges or smears that might be poison, then rose. Sorrow for the squandered life vied with anger, but neither could be indulged now. Sylvanas took a step toward Lorthamar, opening her mouth to speak out of habit. As out of habit, her gaze darted to the pile of skulls at the other side of the marker. She froze. There was no need to continue looking for Anarith. Her skull was the most recent one added to the horrific pile. The blood was still wet. Flies buzzed about. We failed you. Lorthamar, she called, dragging her gaze away from Anarith's wide, staring eyes. Let's take them back, and... A horrible cry rent the air, and the trolls charged. Sylvanas knocked her bow and fired, the arrow going right through one's throat. The troll fell, his scream turning to a choked, burbling sound. She heard a buzzing and leapt away just as a dart painted with poison whizzed past her ear. Landing lightly, Sylvanas drew and fired. Behind her, two more quite dead. Lorthamar had been busy. A troll shaman lay at the elf's feet as he struggled with one of the creatures. It had knocked Lorthamar's bow out of his hand with its crooked spear, and now cackling drew back for the kill. An arrow suddenly seemed to sprout from its eye, and the troll dropped like a stone. Sylvanas whirled, another arrow already knocked, and gazed past it into the copse of trees. Don't shoot! The voice was rough and deep, and clearly not that of a troll. Sylvanas did not move. Drop the bow and come out where I can see you. A bow fell from the branches of the white-barked trees, followed by a male figure who put up his hands to show he had no weapons. Sylvanas blinked. You are a human, she said. Ah, what gave me away? It was not the first human Sylvanas had ever seen. On rare occasions, human couriers had approached the king, the prince, or sometimes even her father. They were uniform in their demeanor, intended to blend together in her mind. None of them had been remarkable enough for her to remember. This one was tall, burly, and dressed in field garb. His quiver was strapped to his back. The hard leather of his jerkin was crisscrossed with scratches made by a variety of weapons, judging by their depth and shape. His boots were mud-spattered, and the hem of his cloak was dark with old stains. Sylvanas narrowed her eyes, regarding him. Old stains, yes, but new ones as well. Dark and wet. Blood, perhaps? He was also possibly the ugliest person she had ever seen. His face was lumpy, as if it had been punched many times, and the bones broken and poorly healed. Small dark eyes peered out from beneath bushy black eyebrows. I wonder if this is, what's his name? The guy that she eventually hooks up with. Still, Sylvanas did not lower her bow. Lorthamar, did we get them all? She called. It seems so, he responded. It would appear I am in your debt, human. Nathanos, something like that. The stranger shifted uncomfortably. It was nothing, he said. His voice suited the rest of him perfectly, rough and raspy. Just lucky I was there. Lucky, yes, but not a coincidence, said Sylvanas. Were you spying on us? The man sighed. Can I lower my hands? Not yet. I asked you a question.
Yes, I was spying on them,
He replied, nodding his head in the direction of a sprawled troll's body.
I was sent here to observe troll behaviour and report back. Lord Lordaeron wanted current information on them, because we suspect they might be cooperating with the Horde, or at the very least allowing a Horde presence here. That is the message I was bringing to your king. When the troll ambushed you two Farstriders. The troll ambushed on you two Farstriders so rudely interrupted my travels. I'm Nathanos Maris, by the way.
There we go. That's her man. I am the woman with an arrow pointed at your heart.
That did not escape my notice.
Their eyes met. Sylvanas waited a moment, then lowered her bow. She had heard from her father and sister that the human kingdoms had been discussing the problem, the green monsters from another world she'd heard threatening humans to the south. She knew Illyria had felt solidarity with their cause. She looked around at the bodies scattered on the grass. 6 had Farstrider arrows in them. 3 had arrows fletched in green and brown. Not only had Nathanos slain the troll that surely would have finished off Lorthamar, but he'd taken out 2 others as well. Help us bring our friends home, she said, and then I will take you to the king. We failed them, Sylvanas said quietly, her voice cold. Lorthamar and Nathanos had borne the fallen back to Farstrider retreat, while Sylvanas walked a few strides in front of them, turning her head, alert for another ambush. There had been none, and the 2 scouts had been laid gently onto the stone flooring. Several Farstriders had been present and began their solemn work of cleaning and preparing the bodies. We needed to vary the routes and times. Our scout's arrival was like clockwork, she thought for a moment, then nodded. I will take the human to the court. He can deliver his message to the king, and I will speak with the Ranger General about this. Stay here, Lorthamar. Tend them well. Lorthamar nodded. To the human, she said, Follow me. Several dragonhawks undulated in the warm breeze just outside the retreat, tranquil, almost sleeping. Sylvanas paused in front of them. Ever ridden one of these? She asked Nathanos.
No.
Ever seen one?
No.
She raised an eyebrow. Do you even know what it is?
It's a dragonhawk.
The human's voice had an edge to it. At least they teach you something, Lordaeron. Hop on, Sylvanas said, swinging up onto the back of hers and gesturing to the second beast. To his credit, Nathanos didn't even pause, and the instant his rear met the saddle, the dragonhawk surged upward, flapping its membranous wings, its body bobbing as it hovered, awaiting direction. Sylvanas knew that humans were accustomed to riding horseback, and maybe atop the occasional griffin, but the half-lion, half-eagle creatures had a broader, flatter back and a feathered neck to cling to if need be. Dragonhawk scales were smooth and slippery. Few had the skill it took to ride one without a saddle. Sylvanas was one, and while she preferred it that way, the others Haldoran had brought were both well equipped. Just follow me, she called from her own beast, shouting to be heard over the wind caused by its beating wings. A short time later, Sylvanas and Nathanos dismounted outside the Court of the Sun. Sylvanas tried to be as discreet as possible, but Nathanos attracted attention the instant he dismounted. Children pointed. Adults paused to stare, some furtively, some openly. Only the palace guards seemed unmoved, their training drilled into them. Once inside, Sylvanas spoke quietly to their commander.
I'll take you to the command room,
he said promptly. I know the way, Sylvanas replied. Nathanos did not bother to disguise his curiosity as they walked together. He looked at the rows of ancient tomes, the various statuary, the magnificent paintings and magically preserved historical documents that were framed and placed upon the walls. Silvermoon is quite an impressive city, Sylvanas said.
Not the word I was thinking of, but yes, that works too.
She found herself smiling ever so slightly. Dirty, smelly, and rude as this human was, it was a refreshing change from her usual experience at court. Anastarian, Grand Magister Bellavir, his apprentice Romath, and her parents were seated at a table with a large map in front of them, already engaged in discussions when Sylvanas entered. Conversation stopped as all eyes turned to the newcomer. Your Majesty, Magisters, Ranger General, and Chief Advisor, this is Nathanos Maris, a Ranger Captain from Lordaeron. Nathanos bowed with surprising grace. He was sent to observe the activities of the Amani, and there is growing concern about a possible threat from the Horde, Sylvanas continued. You should also know that he saved Lorthamar's life and fought with us against a troll ambush. What of Anarith and Rendivan? They were patrolling the area this morning. Sylvanas shook her head darkly. She would speak with her mother later, and steps would be taken to send a message to the trolls.
The Farstriders sacrificed much to keep the kingdom safe,
King Anasterion said.
Sometimes everything.
His voice and expression were solemn.
Quell the loss, we'll remember.
Farstriders were protectors of the people. They understood they could die in the line of duty, yet a loss was always felt. Even Anasterion, who had seen so much death in his long lifetime, never failed to acknowledge that loss, and it was one reason Sylvanas respected him so deeply. The king turned his eyes to Nathanos, sharp despite the centuries upon his shoulders.
We were not told to expect you, Ranger Maris. We would have escorted you properly. With due respect, your majesty, concern regarding the visibility of such an escort was precisely why you were not alerted. I bring information, and I was ordered to gather more as I made my way to Silvermoon.
He patted a weather-worn silk leather pouch.
I have here all the information we humans have gathered on the money activity, which we share in good faith. I also bring a warning. The Horde's activity appears to be increasing. There's a very real concern that they are attempting to recruit the Amoni, which will place your kingdom in immediate jeopardy.
That might explain their boldness in killing our scouts, Sylvanas said. They've been quiet for some time, and this looks like they're trying to goad us into rash action. Larissa cut her daughter off with a sharp look. A tactician never leaps to a conclusion before gathering the facts. Sylvanas had opened her mouth for a tart response when the king held up his hand, a flash of annoyance in those ancient eyes.
We will know more once we have read the missives, the king said. Ranger Maris, you and the information you bear are welcome here, and we thank you for the service you have performed for the Quel'Darai. Please, rest and take some refreshment. You are free to explore Silvermoon as long as one of our Farstriders accompanies you.
I will escort him around the city myself, Sylvanas said. As her mother's glare intensified, Sylvanas added, Given the current situation, I feel it would be useful to learn more about how Lordaeron trains its rangers. Anasterion inclined his head.
Very well. Do not wander far. We may have questions.
Sylvanas bowed, and Nathanos emulated her. With a nod to the rest of the king's council, Sylvanas took the grubby ranger by the arm and left the chamber. Nathanos was silent until they had left the Court of the Sun.
I know I'm irresistible, but this is a bit sudden, don't you think?
Sylvanas halted in mid-stride. My mistake, she said with false sweetness, sounding almost like a purring cat. I'll find another Farstrider to show you around.
I didn't say that,
Nathanos replied.
But you might let go of my arm.
Sylvanas realized she'd been holding his wrist in a death grip ever since they'd left. I would apologize, she said, releasing him, but you lacked the manners to appreciate it.
I am many things,
Nathanos said,
and unmannered is certainly one of them. I rescued one of your Farstriders. You rescued me from boredom. Let's cut it even. I'll find an inn and enjoy your no doubt excellent wine until I'm summoned.
I am not about to disobey the king's order, nor are you, Sylvanas replied. Besides, you're the first human I've met who wasn't a courier, and I would like to know what passes for archery among your military. He smiled slowly.
I believe I'll surprise you.
Farstrider's Square is a short distance, Sylvanas said. They descended the long ramp, walking toward the beautiful fountain at its base. Nathanos frowned.
Is that the famous Sunwell? He scoffed. I thought it would be much more impressive. It's like a place you tossed coins into rather than a legendary font of magic.
Sylvanas gaped. How is it possible a rustic bumpkin like you is deemed worthy to be a spy? The Sunwell isn't even located. It was then that she saw the twinkle in his eyes that betrayed him, though the rest of his face was impassive. She let out a huff of embarrassment that she passed off as exasperation.
The Sunwell is located on the Isle of Quel'Danos,
Nathanos continued in a conversational tone, as if he were the one leading the tour and not Sylvanas.
The ancestor of the very king I just chatted with managed to steal a vial of water from the Well of Eternity on his way out the door of exile. Funny how stealing something can make you king, if the item in question is good enough.
And yet look what it has done, Sylvanas gestured to the beauty all around them. We enjoy nearly perfect health. We have impenetrable magical borders that have protected our land for millennia. It
made you shorter than the night elves you're descended from,
Nathanos said. Sylvanas stopped in her tracks. She was annoyed, but much more amused, though she did not let him see that. Be silent, she warned, or I will silence you myself.
And how would you manage that?
Before he could finish his thought, she had clapped her hand over his mouth. Nathanos held up his hands in mock surrender, and Sylvanas removed her hand. They continued in oddly companionable silence after that, as Sylvanas led them past the fountain and down winding steps into the square. Here Farstriders and others practiced their combat skills. There were training dummies and targets set up. Some trainers stood overlooking the area, keeping an eye on their students from above. Others were down at ground level where they could easily step forward and correct a stance. Ranger Nallis was instructing Liana, one of the newer recruits, but snapped to attention at the sight of Sylvanas approaching. Everyone else present quickly followed. Sylvanas let them stay so for a beat, enjoying how it must look to Nathanos, then said, At ease. Nallis bowed. Good day, Lady Sylvanas. What do you need from us? Only the use of a bow and some arrows and a target, she replied. And, she added, a little space. Nallis signaled to the others, and they moved to oblige, giving Sylvanas and Nathanos plenty of room. They also started to move the gathering crowd away from the activity. To Nathanos she said, You may use my bow and quiver if you wish. Nathanos shook his head.
No thanks. I know this one best.
An archer should be able to shoot true with any bow or arrow, Sylvanas said, and the ones crafted in Quel'Thalas are exquisite.
The prettiest bow and arrows with the most brightly coloured feathers will not make a bad archer a good one.
Sylvanas cocked an eyebrow. Are you telling me you're a bad archer?
You know, he began, it's said in Lordaeron that high elves are the finest archers in the world.
Oh, we are. Elves were made for the sport. Lithe, more slightly built, with superior eyesight and reflexes that could dodge a flash of lightning.
It's also said, Lordaeron, he continued, rubbing his chin, that they're the most stuck-up, arrogant, self-centered and vain people in the world.
Both descriptions are quite true. Do you want to try our weapons?
Already said no, Nathanos said. But you elves would have exceptional hearing. What with your extremely long ears?
Sylvanas clucked her tongue and tucked a lock of hair behind one of said ears. Don't be jealous. I'm sure yours are fine for human.
He sighed. Oh, my tiny ears have heard you, my lady. I'm ready to accept your challenge using my clumsy, badly strung bow and my pathetic arrows.
A ghost of a smile touched her lips. I am pleased that you understand the situation so clearly, she said, and now he too fought to hide a smile. I'm enjoying this, she thought. A little water down the wrong pipe. How long had it been since she had been playful, had exchanged barbs that didn't wound but instead amused? Certainly not since Illyria had left. Her elder sister had taken more than a few Farstriders with her. She had taken her mother's dreams and her sister's joy. Except maybe she hadn't. Maybe Sylvanas' joy was her own, and others could take it only if she let them.
So, where would you like me to stand?
Follow me. He did so as she strode directly away from the target, all the way across the square, then turned around. At this distance, Sylvanas knew a bear would appear the size of her thumbnail. The targets were much, much smaller.
That's a long way,
Nathanos said. You can concede now. I wouldn't hold it against you.
Oh, yes, you would. Besides, I want to see the look on your face when I win.
You'll be waiting quite a while. She waved a hand graciously in the direction of the target. Please, do go first. He scowled, which served only to make his lumpy face even more unpleasing, regarded the target for a moment, and settled himself. Then Nathanos began to fire, the smoothness of the motion riveting. Draw the arrow from the quiver, fit it to the bowstring, aim, and release. It took only a couple of seconds, and 5 arrows were protruding from the target. Despite the distance, Nathanos' arrows were all tightly grouped within the center circle. Sylvanas struggled to keep her face impassive as they walked silently to the target. When they reached it, Sylvanas saw that, not content with simply a tight grouping of arrows, he had placed one dead center in the target. Larissa, of course, was this skilled. Illyria, almost as much so. Sylvanas herself could equal this display, and the Farstriders had the advantage of using the beautifully crafted, highly accurate elven bows and arrows. Nathanos had made do with a human one. She looked at him again. A good, clean shot in battle, obviously, was in the end more valuable than a pretty display of mathematically perfect marksmanship. Nathanos excelled at both. He wasn't even trying to hide his smirk. Everything she had assumed about him was now in question given this remarkable, nigh impossible performance. Show off. Not bad, Sylvanas said with as much nonchalance as possible. Nathanos scoffed.
Let's say you do better,
He said, reaching to tug his arrows from the target. Sylvanas placed a gloved hand on his arm. He turned to her, not drawing back, waiting to see what she would do. Leave them, she said. His expression grew puzzled, but he nodded.
Oh, as the lady commands, he said. That'll probably cost us both some arrows.
She and Nathanos strode back to their mark, and Sylvanas slung her quiver over her shoulder and picked up her own bow. Taking aim, she drew back the string, chose her first target, then opened her fingers to let the missile fly. It sang through the air, found one of Nathanos' arrows, and sank into the target not beside it, but through it, with such force that the shattered pieces of his arrow fell to the ground. Nathanos shrugged.
Lucky shot. Happens. You cost me an arrow, though, and likely ruined your own.
Ah, you are confusing luck and skill, Sylvanas said, deeply pleased with herself.
Well, you'll need more luck if you want to do it again. No one is that good.
Sylvanas quirked the side of her mouth in a smile. 4 more times she aimed and released. 4 more arrows flew. When they reached the target, she and Nathanos could both see clear as day that 3 other arrows had been split as well, but rather than simply shatter the man's arrows, 2 of Sylvanas' arrows had embedded themselves into Nathanos' arrows, forming a pair of long double arrows that would have looked almost comical if it hadn't been so impressive. Sylvanas and Nathanos were silent for a moment. Then Nathanos sniffed and rubbed his gloved hand on his nose, not looking at her.
You miss one, he said mildly.
I sought to spare your pride one indignity at least, said Sylvanas. She reached for the double arrow and pulled them apart, handing Nathanos his, split open at the end by hers.
Is that the best you can do?
No. Only a select few see me at my very best. There was a long pause, but strangely enough it wasn't awkward. Then he said,
I like a challenge.
You seem like someone who would. But don't be too hard on yourself if you fail.
Ha! Now, see, I don't like failing.
Sylvanas thought for a moment. Do your people need you back immediately?
If they do, they'll send for me.
She smiled. I like it. I'm enjoying this. I think it's a good story. I like it. I think it's cool to see her building up with Nathanos, and he's such a turd at times, and you have to fight him so often. That to see this, I mean, is cool. I just really like humanizing villains. I think real life is like that. There's so much nuance, and no matter what, whether it's a villain, someone you don't like at work, a politician, whatever it is, I just think there's so much nuance that there's no black and white. There's no, that's not how the world works. So I love that we get to see these characters in this light. All right, we have another episode in the pipe, 5x5, and I thank everybody so much for watching and for listening. And I look forward to seeing everybody next time on Lore of Warcraft.